I'm a little bit
Yeah,
clunky.
finally. Finally that you can join. So I'm really glad that you can join this Insta live. So here Pak Jose and Pak Carl, teman-teman, I would like to introduce Pak Jose and Pak Carl that would love to sharing to all of us how to build outstanding. Well, I cannot say it's outstanding, but it's a very proper portfolio to apply for the scholarship or to apply to university, because most of the question that the people or the person who wants to apply the scholarship or who want to apply to the university is how to write a proper personal statement that would make the one at the admission of the university will interest on me. So
Right.
if in a simple way, I just could explain to them that you have to write something that it can sell yourself. But
Correct.
this evening, I would like to know more. I would like to know more. What is do you have any specific techniques, or do you have any specific words or anything that you can share here? What don't to write, what you have to write? Is there any bold statement that you have to write in term that make can interest of the admission that who want to hire you or who want to give you a scholarship? Go ahead. Maybe Pak Carl first or Pak Jose first. Go ahead.
Okay, Jose. Jose, you want to start with that, and I'll chime in.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me to this. Hello from New York, and early in the morning, late at night for you
Wow.
folks.
Thank you for your time.
No problem. And so the reality is, I spent 30 years in the what I call the other side of the desk, in the admission side of these colleges and universities when it comes to graduate folks applying. And there are a lot of different components to an application. Personal statement is just one of many that need to come together. The first thing you have to know, which is absolutely spectacular, is that in the United States we have over 4,500 colleges and universities, right? Which is a lot. The downside to that is that every single college university has their own kind of admissions requirements, criteria, and every documentation that is submitted is completely different. And so as you look at things, whether it is your academic background and you're looking at graduate school, you have to know that graduate school is almost like a specialization, right? Like it's something that you're going to specialize in, which means that you have some basic knowledge in the past about something to do with that area of study. So your academic background has to be in that sort of framework, or at least have the fundamental courses that you've taken in the past that will support that degree. As for a personal statement, they usually ask you why you want to consider our program, and what makes you a good candidate, right? So if you are that person who is considering, for example, an MBA program, well, why do you want to go into our MBA program? How is this going to help you in your career path? What kind of experiences you've had in the past? And we'll talk a little bit more about experiences and get more in depth into that. But, that's sort of the foundation of the theory behind what we call a personal statement, when things have impacted you that have, focused you to sort of go into this area of study. The last piece that I can say is perfection, perfection, perfection. They are, whether you are from around the world or whether or not you're from, New York and you're applying to Columbia University, they expect, your writing skills, they expect your grammar to be at a certain level. And so you need to be prepared for that because in that landscape, it's competitive. So I'm going to leave it there because there's really a lot to talk about, but I want to let Carl talk about this as well.
Sure. So the essay part that Ibu Ratna, that you had mentioned is the door that opens for the student, because the admissions people just see paperwork. So now the personal statement is going to tell them a little bit about who they are. Well, not a little bit, a lot about who they are. So this is a statement where the student has to do two things. Number one, explain the admissions officers why they want to go to Georgetown, right? Or Columbia or wherever. So they really have to do their research. You really have to know the university. You really have to know the department that they're going to apply to. So if they're going to get an MBA, or they're going to get a master's degree in public health or environmental science, or any of these specific niche departments within the university, they really have to research that department because it tells the university that, hey, this student really researched who we are, what we can do for them, and what we can offer to the student. At the same time, the student has to tell them what they can do for the university. So the background of the student is something important for the university to understand, right? So the university has to understand that, hey, yes, we're going to teach, we know we can do for the student, but we also want to know what the student can do for us, right? So that's where, and we'll discuss that in length as well, a work or experience background in the field is something that is important, right? So if the student has had an internship or also worked in the field, that also gives a good indication of how the student is prepared. Like Jose said, they have to have someone come already an existing background to make their contribution. And especially Indonesians, U.S. loves Indonesians. There are not many. We need more, right? So Indonesian students bring a lot of background and culture to the university classroom. So that's something that the university loves to see as well. So that's the basic of it. I mean, we can get to more details later, but that's the basic of the personal statement. It's personal. The student has to tell them about themselves, who they are, what makes them tick, what makes them a good student, why they're going to be a good student at whatever university. So this is something that the university is kind of like going to see who they are. Of course, a lot of universities require and want an interview, right, after they receive usually it's after they receive the application, but this is the first door that opens for the student and the university as an introduction, who they are, right?
Yeah. It's very interesting that you say before personal statement is a personal. It's kind of very hard to explain, right? Because it is impersonal. I do understand because it is personal, because every person is unique and they can tell anything about themselves. But in my experience, that how you write it down, how you make the university understand and interested to you. But then I would like to explain also to you that our scholarship is not only for the graduate students, but also for the undergraduate students. We had at the pipeline about 350 students who are waiting to be sent to the university. Now the world is still under preparation program that able to get the LOA. I do understand also that on the graduate level, that Pak Jose and Pak Carl mentioned before that you need to explain about your experience, about that you already had an internship, you already had a certain research that can explain more about you and make sure that the university interested to you. But for the undergrad students, do you have any tips or tricks how to make an outstanding admission that would I don't know how to say it, but to make sure that university will okay, let me pick you as my students.
Okay, well, I'll let Jose talk about that because Jose was an undergraduate admissions officer, so he knows it. So Jose, I'll have you start that.
Yeah, happy to talk about. I mean, the undergraduate world is a very different world. So when we talk about experience and all these different things, and I'm going to put two quotes on top of experience, because there are some programs that you apply to the United States that do require some of this experience part on the undergraduate level. But most in sort of the traditional functionality of the undergraduate statement, number one is it gets a little bit more complex than just a personal statement that we talk about graduate, right? Because colleges and universities, like I said, they have their own admissions criteria, so they make up their own essay questions. So you might have a college or university, for example, there's a system by which you apply on the undergraduate level called the Common App. And there might be, in fact, questions that are in common between everybody who you apply to. But there might be sort of these other documentations that are required as well. They might ask you questions, like they have, you know, a supplement that they might ask you to fill out. So that's when it gets a little curvy, because that could be 5, 10, 20 different questions, but it's really all about a person. And when you talk about experience for an undergraduate, it's usually activities, right, that you're talking about. What are you involved in? Do you work? Did you spend the summer doing something that you do exciting? And that gets a little, you know, the real trick, and my daughter just got into college this year. She got into all of our colleges and universities that she applied to. And I kind of gave her my 2 cents about how to write her essay. And I said, you know, write about what makes you special. Right? Who are you as a person, and what is your makeup of a person? And then, you know, when you read these essay questions and think about what has impacted you in your life, right? And when you go into this sort of writing of this essay and these questions, try to use that as your anchor, right? Like your anchor for filling out your anchor for answering these questions. And she did a great job. She got into all of her schools. You know, she talked about herself and, you know, where she came from and her family's from and all these things. I'm from the island of Puerto Rico, and my wife is from Macau. And so, you know, it was kind of interesting. She did it all through food. She talked about how great it was to eat certain food in Puerto Rico, and how great it was to, you know, eat food in Macau, and the difference in the cultures, and how she was this mixed person. Why did I tell her to advise her to do that and not say, hey, you know, I'm the president of the student government and everything else? It's because one of the things that you have to know, that most of us in the admissions office, we read thousands of essays. So the essay that's most interesting is the one that we're going to remember, not the one that sounds like what everybody else is copying and doing. We don't really, you know, I remember reading these essays, and I remember sometimes yawning and saying, this person just said exactly the same thing that this other person said. But if you're unique and you have an incredible experience about something, I don't care if you're like, I don't know, you know, you like to fish and you swam with the dolphins or swam with a turtle, or you protect them. That's more interesting than you telling me, yeah, I'm a great student and I did great in science and I did all the stuff. The final thing I will tell you is structure to these essays. I know you're looking for that stuff. Again, the grammar and the structure of it. You know, Carl and team are the pros at all this kind of stuff, you know, but I always tell you, have an introductions, body paragraphs, and a conclusion to what you write, right? And thesis statement. Those are all things that are very common among writing for these structures. But, you know, I'll let Carl talk about stuff like that, because he's been really helping lots of folks in that piece of it. So structure, and boy, make it interesting, you know, and don't think that, you know, the beauty of applying from a place from Indonesia is that an admissions officer doesn't know probably anything about you, right? And your culture and who you are. They're sitting there and they just read 10 essays about, you know, kids who are so smart and they won the science fair. And then all of a sudden you start telling them about something very unique about your culture and all that. Like, they say, oh, this is pretty neat. So when you go into committee, you remember somebody's name and goes, you know, I read this essay. Did somebody second read it? Because this is a really, really great story. And I think you guys should read it. So that is the way you want to write essays.
Right. Everybody has a unique story. It's like everybody has a thumbprint, right? Different thumbprint. Everybody has a unique story. There's not one student that we've dealt with, that we've helped, that does not have a unique story. Now, of course, some universities are more competitive than others. Some universities are more demanding than others. More and more people are applying to universities right now. So the universities are trying to figure out how for us to get, you know, to become more competitive to the schools. So the universities are doing many different things. They're asking for more things. Most of them are asking for, the main thing that universities ask for is, how can a student challenge themselves in the undergraduate level, right? How can they challenge themselves? So what can they challenge themselves academically? Extracurricular activities, writing their essays. So their essay has to be what we call the wow factor, okay? The wow factor is going to tell the university what makes this student unique. And it tells the university if this student really fits in that university, right? So if a student fits in that university, then they'll see that through the essay. So there's a lot of different components. I hope we can spend more time on the essays. The essay is already it's a course in itself on how to write the essay. Every year also, the universities may change their prompts. They may change their questions. So this is something that we have to keep up on. So the universities will say, well, we want to be more challenging this year. We want to be more, we want to get students of a certain ilk, of a certain quality. So we're going to change the question a little bit. We're going to change our prompts. So a lot of colleges every year, they change their prompts. They change to get different questions, depending on the cohort they received the previous year, right? So they want to always be more competitive. Because the universities have been getting 20-30% more applications every year, that makes a university who used to be maybe 50% competitive, as they get more applications, they become then 15% competitive. So the more applications that they receive makes them more competitive as they go along.
Yeah, 30% every year is rising. It's what a number. I cannot imagine how many personal statements that you read every single day.
Right.
to make sure that it is a very competitive selection process. So for the undergraduate, so you maybe let's say I'm an undergraduate. I want to apply to undergrad. I have a certain number of experience in internship. I have a certain numbers having I don't know, like a competition. So I can write those down and explain to university and make sure that make them interest on what I'm doing. It is what like what you said before. Well, it's more clear for the undergraduate, and the second one is the most question is coming from the I don't know, the people or those who want to apply for the graduate students, especially for the PhD level. So we do have undergraduate. A master is something else that maybe it's not too difficult. I'm not saying it is easy, but I also not saying but it's not difficult. But PhD is something level. It's another level of experience. So some people say that it is hard for me to get the supervisor. It is hard for me to convince the supervisor that they want to having me as their students. Do you have any idea or do you have any tips and tricks how to convince the supervisor that my proposal or my research is something way far that you can go with?
Jose, I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, I mean, just to understand, PhD is a doctor, right? That is the highest level of what you can probably reach in higher education. I mean, PhD folks, when you said I said on the graduate side that you needed experience. PhD folks are experienced, and so they're for example, if you're going into a session that is focused on, education, for example. Well, perhaps you're a teacher already or a principal at a school or a head of a school, and that's why you're seeking your PhD in that specific area. So when you talk about PhD, they definitely, and this is something that is also unique for all colleges and universities, right? Some of them are designed for specific types of students. The graduate programs, master's programs, have programs that are saying, in some cases, you can graduate from college and go directly into these institutions. But sometimes it says you need 5 years worth of experience. You have to be a business person out there to be a part of our MBA program. PhD just gets again to another level. And your statement, your personal statement, has to be completely significant. The other part that I think PhD does that is very, very unique is that it really relies on recommendations. Like, why are you being recommended for this? Besides you coming up with a great story to do this, Perhaps it's your, the head of the school that's saying, this person would be a great candidate for this PhD program because I'm going to make them assistant head of school, right? And so they are, that's a great recommendation to get. That's somebody who's a leader and he can do. The other thing that the PhD programs seek is a little bit of what Carl talked about, which is contribution. What kind of contribution are you bringing into the classroom, right? What makes you unique and what is your point of view that is unique? PhD programs work on cohorts. Cohorts are a group of people that you put together to sit in a classroom, to interact and to learn and to do research. The other thing that you have to know is that a program like PhD, the first few courses that you even take is about how to do your research and how do you do your dissertation. And in your dissertation is in fact like a mini book or a book that you're writing, right? On a subject that nobody has commented on, right? Like you are uniquely, or you have a specific point of view on that specific area. So when you're looking at, PhD programs and you're looking at putting together an application, the highlights as a professional that might make you an essential part of a cohort team might be the things that you want to express in your personal statement, right? Or in your application, or in your recommendations, in choosing the right people to recommend you for a PhD program. It's really essential. And these recommendations just don't say, hey, Jose Flores is a really nice guy. It says a lot more than that. It says, he demonstrates leadership. We need him here to do this. We need him to do that. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who have education in their blood. This is important to them in this world. There's a lot of liberty in PhD. I don't know if folks know this, but there might be a class that you might be attending, but in reality, most of your time is spent in doing research. So it's all about research and getting out there and connecting to that dissertation that you're going to write, which in fact, at the end, you're going to need to defend. Because those faculty members get in a room, besides you making the class requirements, you're going to have to get in front of these faculty members and defend your point of view. And you're going to get a mentor, a person who's going to be a mentor. That's another thing. Do the people in the admissions side of it, PhD, is not an admissions office alone. It is faculty members are involved in this. And so faculty members are saying to themselves, do I want to be this person's mentor? Because somebody's going to have to take that role to help that student on as a counselor. And it's usually a faculty member in that area.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the PhD program, as Jose said, is unique. It's kind of like almost a one-on-one with the university and the mentor. So it's always good that the student who applies to a PhD program already has a thesis in mind, already has some research in mind prior to them even applying, because that will then boost their chances in getting into that particular university, because that university may need that particular research. So it's also a give and take, right? So if the university needs research on, or is desiring research on something involving Indonesian health or infectious diseases or things of that nature, where it's unique to the student and where he comes from, his culture, that brings also what he can contribute to the university. So that's super, super important. And research can go really far. Research can go to grants, right? The university might get excited and I say, wow, we love this research. We're going to give you a $100,000 grant for you to continue your research, or for you to travel, or for you to do whatever you need to do for the research, okay? Because research is just not sitting in the library, right? And going through Google. Research is traveling. We had a research person who we knew, Indonesian, I think it was University of Kansas. I can't remember what it was. And she had to do research on terrorism. That was her research. So she had to interview, I think, 70 terrorists. So it took her a little bit longer than normal because she had to find them and run after them and get them. But in the sense that the university was so interested in her research that they also contributed to her travel and research costs and things of that nature as well. So research can be different things. I mean, if you're doing medical or doing something in material science or actuary science or even business PhDs, then you might not need to go so far. But a lot of the schools would love to know what the student is going to do their thesis on, because that gives them also the sense that, hey, we need this research, we need this student. So that's another factor that puts into it for them to make that match.
Okay, so for the PhD, the first thing first is the proposal.
Yes.
Thesis proposal has to be strong. A thesis proposal to convince of the, I don't know, maybe the supervisor or maybe on the university, that it is a very important for the university, and also for the, what is the contribution of those research, not only for the university, but also for, I don't know, maybe for the funding from the country that sent them to the university. The first, the one that makes me interesting, what Pak Jose said before, is about the recommendation. How important it is to convince the university that I am the right person. It is important. It is I don't know how to say it, but it is the university will recognize those recommendations wherever they come from, or are they going to value the recommendation from what they write or the person?
So yeah, no, to get you that, it's really the value. It's twofold, right? I mean, you have to realize, I once saw a PhD recommendation coming from a famous person in a country. Like I recognized the person. I said, wow, this person recommended this person, right? Turned out it was a
prominent person, right?
Yeah, it was a PhD in political science, and it was the president of the country that was recommending this person to apply. So the person sometimes makes a difference, but not all the time. Most importantly is like Carl said, how is it disaligned to, so if you were looking at something that has to do with sustainability, and you come from a country where sustainability is important, environment is important, and there is all this research that's being done in that particular country, and you get somebody who is either, well known in the area, or not even need to be well known, but is part of an organization that has a good position and is saying, we want this person to get a PhD because we want them to do this and that, and they're great, and they're leaders and whatever it is. That's a strong recommendation. But you got to be smart when you talk about PhDs and think about who's going to recommend you, because it can't be like a friend. It can't be somebody who knows you on the side or something like that. It should be either an employer. It should be somebody you've done research with. It should be, if it's going to be a faculty member, look, faculty members are great because they publish. And they publish information that sometimes folks on the other end are reading. And you get those folks who goes, oh, this is somebody who's being recommended by this great faculty member who has done a lot of research in this area. And, you can even, the faculty member can say things like, we did research together. This is my assistant. This is somebody who helped me or contributed to my research. And that makes an enormous difference, right? Because as Carl said, sometimes they're trying to fit you into their universe, which is, we're writing a grant on sustainability. Now we have a person who comes from this thing, and and that will be a great addition to it. So when they get here, and thinking about what you're going to research, because you're going to research on sustainability, and you come from Indonesia, and it's a great place to come from, you're going to be able to contribute some amazing things to what we're trying to accomplish here at the university.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that. I think that as it comes to sustainability, who's the candidate, right? How do we identify the candidate? A lot of, I know that in Indonesia, a lot of universities are trying to get their lecturers to get doctorate degrees. So another partnership with the American university that they're going to get the PhD is not only they're going to do research for that university that they're going to, but it could also be joint with the university that the lecturer comes from. So a partnership between the universities with PhD candidates. For example, an Indonesian university has lecturers and the university wants to get their lecturers to get PhD programs. There can also be a partnership between the university in Indonesia and the American university where the Indonesians are getting their PhDs. So that's another big initiative that is helpful in getting this cohort, the PhD cohort, made. So Like Jose said, also, it's all research. It's all that. So if the lecturer comes from a lecturer who wants to get a PhD, is coming from a Indonesian research university, and the Indonesian Research University wants to send 3, 4, 5 lecturers for a particular discipline, let's say education, let's say health, let's say environmental science, then there could be joint research between the Indonesian university and the U.S. university as well, making the candidate even stronger, right? And also what's important about research, Jose mentioned briefly too, is the publishing. They're going to get published. And there's nothing better than getting your research published in a journal of the particular discipline, right? And if it's a joint publication with Indonesia and the United States, and the publication starts in the US, that puts the students on a different, higher pedestal. So that's super important as well. So there's a lot of great factors that happen with a PhD candidate. Publishing is one of the best things that can happen. It also raises the university's level, right? The Indonesian university becomes more of a global university as their lectures are publishing in United States journals or any particular periodical that specializes in the field. So that's another great thing that can happen. So it's a multi-advantage program, but it's not easy. Like, you know, it's something that the student really needs to dedicate themselves to go after the PhD. But I've known many Indonesian lecturers who've gotten their PhDs, and they say it's a great experience. It's a great ride for them. They will always have that link with the university that they got their PhD in. The university may even call them and say, "Hey, we have a grant for research. We'd like you to join." You know, so you have also post PhD research as well, because every university all over the world, Indonesia, US, the more the lecturers publish, the more global they become, the more credentials that they have.
Okay. So the other question that most people asking is, which university that suitable for me? I know it is not easy to choose the university. I was come to the United States about at 2008, and I graduated from the UMass, University of Massachusetts, and I do remember that I chose this university because there's one person, Ron Hambleton, who is very good in psychometry. He's a psychometrician. So, but some I don't know, some person or some student is still confused. Which university should I go? Should I go to the A university, B university, to other university? Would you like to share your top knock? I don't know. Do you understand top knock or not? Can you share the top? I don't know. Top knock. I don't know. What is I don't know how to say it. If you want to go to the university or to plan to study a certain of program, how you would suggest to a person how to choose the university? Whether it is the ranking, or whether it is the supervisor, or whether it is the lab, or whether it is the city itself.
Yeah, I'll have Jose start with that. And I'll start by saying it depends, right? So the undergraduate. Well, Jose, why don't you talk about the undergraduate first, and what you feel is the core, the best. But I'll just say before Jose starts it's the best fit. The university has to match the students. That's super important. All right, the university has to match the students in many different ways. The student may like to be in a city. The student may like to be in a more rural country area. So that's because it's not only academics that you're doing, it's also your social, right? So your social life as well. So some students love to be in the city. I had students who said, I want to go to NYU or Columbia because it's right in Manhattan. Some students say, well, I want to go a little bit further out near Boston, maybe Amherst, right, where you went, which is a nice, beautiful town, right? Old Boston suburb. So it depends where. But Jose, give them the other stuff.
Yeah, You know, it's funny. I was in Amherst about 3 months ago. UMass Amherst. My daughter visited that school as well. Beautiful school, beautiful place. But it is rural. So the first thing you do, I'm going to start with the undergraduate, folks. The first thing you do is we have different temperatures in the United States. So I don't know how important your temperature, but for my daughter, for example, she grew up in the Northeast where there is snow and it gets cold and we have temperatures that go negative on Celsius and all that. She is going to school in Arizona now, which is a desert, right? It is essentially very hot all the time. Yeah. So, you know, if those things are important to you as an undergraduate, you might want to think about it. I always tell undergraduate students, listen, you're thinking about, in the U.S., this education is 4 years. So you're thinking about packing your bags and moving into a place for 4 years. So you should start thinking about that too. And, you know, whether it's Ivy, more competitive institutions, or non-more competitive institution, they're in all different locations. And so that's an important part. The other part that I would consider is that we have universities in the United States that have, I don't know, 5,000 students. My daughter goes to a school that has 50,000, right? My son went to a school that had 28,000 students. So and they are happy to go to these schools, and simply because some of these schools have sports, and my daughter and my son want to be part of the sports life, you know. So it's a big deal when Arizona State plays University of Arizona and everybody gets all happy and watches it on TV and all that. So that was another reason, you know. So they chose bigger schools. Bigger schools also equate into sometimes bigger classrooms. A classroom in the United States can be anywhere between, I don't know, 25, 30 students up to like 600 in a classroom. So, so you know, and if you have never been in a 600 classroom, but you've gone to some concert or something like that, that's how it feels, right? It's a lot of people in a room. And how do you engage with a faculty member, which, by the way, I want to point this out. A faculty member at a college or university is not a teacher. They're there to lecture and to talk to you about things, but they're not essentially there to hold your hand. But in some cases, there are colleges that would say they would hold your hand and they would walk you through this, and you'll have more connection with the faculty member. So as you're choosing these things, the other thing is be realistic. You know, there are some schools in the United States, and Carl, you know, the one thing I want to say, look, in the United States, there's a job called a guidance counselor for students on purpose, because it is so difficult to even navigate, because they're so different and the admissions requirements are so different that even choosing, like if you know, our grading scale is from 1 to 4, right? You know, and sometimes it's to 1 to 100. 1 to 100 is easier. Obviously, if you get to 100, you're the smart kid with the great grades, all right? So you're applying to very good schools because we have those grades. Some of these institutions require examinations, SATs, ACTs. Even that is a paradigm, because you don't know how well you do in one than in the other. And maybe you do better on one exam, and some schools would say you could take it more than one. Some would say we'd look at the highest scores that you take, and some other schools might not. Some schools will talk about, like, you know, big names like Stanford or something like that. Stanford would say something along the lines like, well, most of our applicants had, in addition to that, 4 APs or 5 APs, or most of them either came from an international baccalaureate program. They're proud, right? Because that makes their rankings, and they have 4.0. There are Ivy League institutions in this country where you apply to, and you can't even, you know, everybody's perfect. Everybody got a high score on the test. Everybody has a perfect essay. Everybody had the APs and the IBs. And so even those students are being denied. I took my kids on a tour of MIT. My son is kind of computer science, so I took him to MIT. I was surprised. I don't know if you know this, but at MIT, the first year of your education, you're not even going to classes. You're just seeing an advisor and you're doing research. Why? Because the kids who get into MIT are so smart and been doing research already and have been creating their own robots. Like in MIT, in one of the dorms, they call it the roller coaster dorm, because they build a roller coaster that for every year for the incoming students, and it gets certified by you know, Massachusetts certifies. Like it's like going to like an amusement park, because these guys are such engineers that they can do something like that. that is this particular type of school for a particular type of student, right? You know, you're going to be given this freedom. I'm not sure my daughter, you know, should have gotten freedom when she needed structure, right, around her education, the classes to go to and all that, as compared to a student who goes to MIT. I took a tour of it, and the student said, every student here has to do research. So I raised my hand, and I said, what was your research? And she said, I'm studying, astrophysics, and my research was around our telescope where we watch the stars at night, and I created an algorithm that allows us not to show up to the telescope when it's cloudy out there. So now the telescope realizes, right? She's a sophomore. The telescope realizes that it's cloudy. So it alerts all the students and say, don't go there today, right? This is the type of student that you're talking to, an MIT student, as compared to my daughter or my son, you know, went to school, who are also in the US. We have this culture of growing on a college campus, of finding your way, of finding, you know, what you want to do. And so my kids needed that too, right? They needed a part of that besides the academic piece. And then the other caveat of it is, if in the United States, one of the things that people should look at is when people graduate from these colleges, are they all successful? Some are, and some are not, right? No matter how Ivy League and how great they are. And some little schools all of a sudden has these amazing, successful people. You know, there was a guy who, you know, just sold his company for $1 billion in New York City, and he went to Baruch College, which is a city CUNY school, right? Which is for business, but that's what he did. You know, he didn't go to Harvard, you know, he didn't go to Yale, he didn't go to Princeton, but he just sold a company for $1 billion. An idea that was in there came up, and he created this idea and was able to sell his company afterwards. So what is the perfect school? The one thing I will say to you as you do your research, look for, you know, and again, your guidance counselor tells you this, perfect schools are also known how many students stick around for 4 years, right? Retain at that school. There's some students who aren't happy, they leave. You should look at those percentages and whether or not they have those academic areas of study. And then think about your academic area of study. I always love it when a student says, you know, I want to be in business, but then they want to put themselves in some sort of upstate New York or, you know, country-like with the cows and the goats. And I ask myself, where are you going to do your internship? You know, in the US, you can, while you go to school, you can have an internship. You can go practice that. Now, if you were studying business and you were in a place where there are a lot of businesses around, right, in a city or something like that, well, those opportunities are probably larger there than it is, unless your business is going to be, you know, agricultural, right, which you're out there and then there. You should think about aligning those things. And I'm going to put a stop on that because I could do a full sort of conversation on just trying to choose the school. I was not only on the other side, but again, I just got my daughter into this process, and it was very interesting to look at this as a parent as well.
Yeah, and Ibu, you mentioned ranking, right? So ranking is very it's very tricky. It's really, I mean, there are schools, and Harvard might not like me for this, but there are schools who are better than Harvard. It all depends on what the student wants to study, what their environment is. So ranking is very superficial. U.S. News and World Report ranking, they're falling apart right now because the ranking for that is basically what the university tells them they are, right? So there's a lot of ranking that is really not I mean, even QS and all these type of rankings, it's very difficult to ascertain a true unbiased ranking, okay? Because a lot of universities put their input into it. Now there are some rankings that are the private ones like Fisk or Princeton Review or others that are less biased, but at the same time it's best fit. So what we kind of say is, yes, who doesn't want to get into Harvard? Who doesn't want to go into Princeton or Yale or Wharton? Who doesn't want to do that, right? But at the same time, that might not be the greatest fit. I mean, I've had students who, one of my students got into Stanford a couple of years ago, and he hated it. He dropped out, and he transferred to UC Berkeley. So it really depends on, it has to be the fit, right? Because some people might not really be good students for Harvard or Yale, but they might be great students for a University of California school or a SUNY school, a New York school, right? Or a smaller school. So ranking is really a superficial thing. Yes, the name Harvard, the name Wharton is a great name, but that name could be better used in graduate school, because it's easier to get into an Ivy League as a graduate student than it is as an undergrad. Why? There are less applicants, right? So at the same time, I think that those who are going into the undergrad, great, they're going to get that background wherever they're going to go. But those who want to continue to their graduate level, then they can really think about, hey, I want to go to, I want to go to Wharton. They have great research on certain business analytics that I really want to work with. Okay, and I'm not saying it's easy to get into, but it could be easier. But because the student already has developed through their undergraduate a lot of background that could really satisfy a more competitive school for their master's degree.
Okay. Well, okay.
So,
very interesting.
That's it. So yeah. So I always tell students, be careful with ranking. Really be careful with ranking. Okay. Ranking is not what they say it is always, right? I think, Jose, you would agree with me with that, right? I think ranking is something that's different.
Look, the reason why U.S. News and World Reports, which is what everybody knows, my daughter knew this too, so is doing what it's doing. It's a business, and so it does collect money from advertising and all that kind of stuff. So you got to be aware of that. The second part is all the Ivy Leagues have jumped out. The great names have decided we're no longer going to play a part of that because we don't think it's fair to everybody else. The other thing that you might want to do is sometimes you should look at these colleges and look at where their faculty came from. Turns out that most of their faculty are from the top schools of the country. You don't become a PhD worker from a terrible PhD program. You usually come from very good PhD programs and you become a faculty member at an institution. Even these small liberal arts ones, because of their tradition. Remember, some of these small, tiny schools have been around since the 1800s in the U.S. And so some of them have a tradition of only hiring like these amazing, individuals that they would bring onto their staff, right? That being said, look, they're great Ivy League institutions. And I know, depending on what your plan is, if you come back to your country, sometimes the name gives you a difference. But I agree with Carl. We're living a world where, at least in the United States, if you don't have a master's degree and above, it becomes a little difficult for you to find those positions. Although Google and Amazon might argue you can work without a college degree. And then somebody else in this world would say, well, are you going to make them the CEO of the company if they work without a college degree? Probably not, right? So you're not going to be the CEO. You might be the person doing support for them, but you might not ever be the CEO. So I'm one of those folks that says, when you hear those things, do I really need an education? Notice that the people on top, where you're going to make the big money, are the ones who have these educations, right? So whether it is whatever school you choose is what you take advantage of. Because if you go to Harvard and you have a 2.0, believe me, when you get your first job, they're going to ask you what grade. Again, this is out of a 4. 2.0 is pretty sad. So if you're going to get that job and they're going to ask you what your GPA is, which is going to be required by your resume in some cases, right? Are you really going to get that job, right? Just because you went to Harvard doesn't make you a great candidate for that position.
Yeah.
And I agree with Carl 100%. You should consider doing this at your graduate level. That's when you buy a brand, right? You don't buy it on the undergraduate level. Lots of people try to do that. And I know people who went to an Ivy League school undergraduate but couldn't get into a graduate program because with the 2.0, you can't get into a good graduate program. That's too low out of a 4. That's a problem.
Right. Wow. I do have. Go ahead, Bakar.
I'm sorry, we gave you a lot of information, but I'm sure there's some questions.
Yeah. There is no one asking for a question that maybe they are too excited to hear two of you to giving us a lot of information, and we still need to digest it more. But unfortunately, we already had 5:55 minutes already, and I do really want to have more time with you, but I don't know whether you have more time for us. But before we closing this live, this Instagram live, do you have any other words from the scholarship hunter that viewing our live now?
I I think that for scholarships, and I'm really impressed with the Indonesian scholarships that are available for the students. There are many and they're good, and I've seen students. I've seen the product of these scholarships, the Indonesian students who've gotten the scholarships. I was in Boston last week, and I met 13 LPDP scholars who are at Boston University. I sat down with them. I took them out to lunch, and they told me some great stories, their experiences, their camaraderie, their networking, which is super great. So I'm very impressed, and so is many of us on the the high level institutions, that Indonesia has some great opportunities for the Indonesian citizens as it goes to the scholarships, and it's proven to work really well. I meet with them all the time. We train them. We prepare them to go to U.S. universities. So I think that taking advantage of the Indonesian scholarship funds rather are something that really works, and is something that I think and U.S. universities like Indonesians. There are not enough Indonesians in the U.S. There are 300,000 Chinese in the U.S., but there's only 8,000 Indonesians. So there's not enough. And I think universities want to see that. That's why I always tell Indonesian students, apply to the U.S. They'd love to see more students from Indonesia. There's really not enough. So that's something that's a big advantage.
Yeah. Pak Kal and Pak Jose, yeah, we do have one quick question. Can public school in Indonesia continue to bachelor degree in U.S.? I heard we need to take an IB test. Can you explain more about it?
What test?
IB test. I don't know what an IB test that it means.
Okay.
IBT maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
So just about testing in general, if the student is an Indonesian student in the Indonesian curriculum, they're probably going to have to take the English exams, TOEFL, IELTS, things of that nature, to basically tell the university that they are competent enough in English to be successful in class, right? So that's super important. Now, if the student comes from an IB curriculum or a Cambridge curriculum, then they can take for Cambridge the A levels, or if they're an IB student, they can take the IB test, or AP the AP test. So and there's another test that's becomes a three-letter bad word, the SAT, right? So a lot of the students, a lot of the schools have waived the SAT, made it optional. But the SAT, schools are now starting to want it, like MIT wants it, Georgetown wants it. So that's another pesky test. But they're also, and same with the graduate school. There's this bad word called the GRE, right? So that's another test that MIT is going to want. If you want to go to get a master's degree for engineering at MIT, they're going to say, yeah, we want to see your quant skills and things like that. So, but again, it's case by case, right? So some programs may not require the GRE for a graduate, and some universities may not really require the SAT, right? So there's all sorts of testing. Unfortunately, like all students suffer their testing in high school. They get more tests than I would imagine that they take, but there are certain tests, particularly English, the IELTS or the TOEFL, or now Duolingo is another English test that colleges accept. So I think that's something that particularly students who have taken Indonesian students who have gone through the Indonesian curriculum, that's going to have to be something that they'll have to take, unfortunately. But again, if they really want to do well, the IELTS and the TOEFL is not that bad. It's not that difficult. And then I have the Duolingo, which is also not that bad. Just, read books, watch YouTube, watch Netflix, and you'll be okay. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So Jose,
send the kids to watch Netflix. Okay, go ahead, Jose.
No, I'm 100% in agreement. You know, with Carl. The question about the IB test is some schools might want to see the test and the scores from the test. Some schools don't care. They actually like that you're in IB classes because they're a little harder. So they actually, you know, when they review your application, that's sort of there. But you know, all of these examinations and all of these requirements and all of this, truthfully, it kind of boils down to navigation to figure out, as Carl talked about, the right fit for your school, depending on who you are. There are choices. The good thing is, again, there's 4,500 of these colleges and universities available for students. And by the way, when I say colleges and universities, sometimes people hear college and think that it's like lower than university. In the US, it's kind of not. It's just talk about sizes of universities, kind of define some of those type of things. So, you know, there's a lot of choices for you, but, you know, navigate your way through this process and you'll get a lot more benefits for it. You know, you'll get that benefit of understanding where you might fit and go through that logic of, you know, what schools you should apply to and what are your chances of getting in.
Great. But Carl, Jose, thank you very much for the time. It is a very fruitful conversation. It's a lot of knowledge that we know. I do hope that we can meet in person. Maybe, I don't know, sometimes. And I do really hope also that you, two of you or maybe one of you can become our guest at another live. I don't know when it is also. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And also good night. Thank you, Bakal. Thank you, Jose. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care. Good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.